afternoon. I'm glad you came this afternoon for our program. And we have people that this afternoon, one grew up in Baldwinsville, another one migrated from Phoenix. Good. And I'm sure they've got some stories to tell, personal and otherwise. Wendy and Andy Dryden.
So yeah, now what?
Go to it. Anything you want to talk about?
Well, I guess I'll start because I was here first. He tells me I have no memory, but up until from 58 to 79, he can't contradict me because he doesn't know, so I can just make it up. So, moved here in 58. I was 2 months old. Mother was life resident of Ballsville, born here, grew up on Mechanic Street, Lucille Clark. Our dad, Barney Clark, he grew up Belle Isle, and they got married in 46-ish after the war. Moved to the city, which is Syracuse to anybody from here back then. The city was Syracuse. And got too crowded once I was born, so we moved out here. Our Uncle Bill was in real estate then. He ran Clark's Stand up on 370 for years. He sold my parents a house. Moved out here in 58. Right next to Gates Funeral Home. And let's see, went to school at Elizabeth Street School. My mother went there all through, graduated out of Elizabeth Street School. I had Mrs. Rader, Mrs. Sant, Mrs. Beebe, Miss Martin, Mrs. Duck, and Mrs. Hughes were my teachers. And I was just thinking, I think Teresa's son had Mr. Roberts, and I remember he used to smoke in the classroom, which is, I mean, can you imagine it now? But and he used to send.
Mr. Roberts, not Greg.
I should specify. He used to send kids. He'd give them money, and he'd send them down to corner pharmacy to buy cigarettes or cough drops, and right in the middle of school. And I remember telling our daughter we had bomb drills. She was amazed at that there was such a thing back then, and we had them regularly and frequently. And the Elizabeth Street School is also a fallout shelter, which she had never heard of. And I guess those days are long gone, I hope. I was thinking yesterday when I thought about Mercer Park was just such a big part of our growing up, the river and the park, and they had a beach you could swim because the river was still clean. And they had a concession stand down there, and I mean, we just spent hours down there in the summer. I took swimming lessons down there from Paul Goulet. Remember a few drownings, which a couple out of the same family. That was always scary when they'd have the lifeguard couldn't find somebody, and they'd make the people in the water join hands and walk through in case you kicked somebody, which is how they found a couple people when I was down there. And growing up next to Gates Funeral Home, every time my dad saw Ralph Gates, he'd say, "How's business?" "Dead." It was just always. And I remember when he passed away, I think it was on Mom's birthday on November 30th. And Kimmy was small, so it had to have been 87, 88. Oh my gosh, my dad came in crying. And I mean, they'd just been such good neighbors for years. And people say, "Oh, how could you stand living next to a funeral home?" That's all we knew. And it was kind of fun to be outside in the dark playing hide and seek, and you could peek down in the window and see all the equipment they had there. And we always knew when somebody in town passed away because you'd see them wheel them in, and they had a little pond there, and I can remember, that was just, now it's a parking lot, but there was bushes and a pond. It was like this little oasis in the middle of the village, and they had tadpoles in there. I can remember my mother, "Don't go near that, don't go near that." And of course we always did, and I fell in it once and came home all green and slime. And "Wait till your father comes home." Oh, I waited and sweated it, and she never told him. But. And what else? My formative years. As we drove over here, I thought, the river really divided us. be real young, I don't remember ever playing with anybody on this side of the river. It was always that side of the river. And you could run loose day and night. I walked to school when I was kindergarten, first grade. Nobody, now I think every kid is bused, and we walked alone. And I could go to my friend's house 3-4 blocks away at 10, 11 years old and be home by dark. And it was just, I wouldn't ever have thought to let our daughter do that when she was that age, but it just what, nobody was afraid of anything. And I suppose there was stuff out there, but it didn't happen here, it seemed like. And I think my first, meeting people across the river and stuff was with my friend Tina Gross, Teresa's daughter. And once they built Tri-County Mall and River Mall, oh my God, a mall. And they had grants, and it had a lunch counter, and there was a McDonald's. And back then, you didn't say, Mom, take us here, Dad, give us a ride here. Well, there's no here to go to. There was Fairmount Fair that I knew of. I don't think, maybe Shopping Town, but that was in another world. And so we'd either ride our bikes and we'd ride across the locks. And now I can't even stand the thought of walking across them. Come across the locks, up Grove Street, cut through where Florida Funeral Home was, and we'd go to Grandma Regan's, which was Teresa's mom. And I just knew them as Grandma Regan and Aunt Lottie for years, and it was the best place to go. They were such awesome people. We'd make a pit stop there, ride our bikes up and get a Big Mac. Or I remember clear one time going to Grant's and getting a fish sandwich, and then I got food poisoning. Had to go to the hospital. That was not that much fun. One other thing I was thinking about was, and not a lot of people seem to remember it, we didn't have a washer dryer growing up, and either my dad or my brother would take me and my mom to the laundromat over, now I don't know what's there. There's JP's Tavern, and the laundromat was next to that. I don't know what's there now at all. There's something, but like
Pizza
across
place.
from, huh?
Pizza place, isn't it?
Oh yeah, Twin Trees actually, yeah, and that was a laundromat, and we went there every Sunday night. And I had to go with my mom because she had a inner ear thing, Meniere's disease, and she was subject to dizzy spells, and so she never wanted to go anywhere alone. And in the summer, every summer, I can't tell you what month, but it was pretty much always the same, gypsies would come through, and they came in those old-fashioned trailers, like what are they, like Airstream,
yeah.
and they'd come out like it was a clown car. There were just so many of them, and they hung in the laundromat at night. They'd have their meals there, and I think there was a TV there at some point. And I was fascinated with these people, and my mother was like, where's my purse? You keep my purse between us. And I don't know what they did here, but do you remember them coming in?
I remember, but I don't know what they did here either.
They'd go down and back at the laundromat, and you keep going, you get down to the creek, and they'd have all their little campers there, and these little lights set up, and a fire going there, and I was absolutely fascinated with seeing these gypsies. And my mother, oh my God, she's so nervous what was going to happen. And I think they came through and did work, and they're scams, I guess, I don't know. But that was just a memory I was thinking about last night. And then junior high, high school, nothing eventful, I don't think. All those years my dad worked at Allied Chemical, and then my mom went to work there as the plant nurse when I was probably in Durgee. And he retired out of there. She stayed until it closed in 86. And high school's done, I'm over with school. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I got a call from Billy McCann at Van Wee Chevy, and I didn't know him. I sort of remembered the name he was a friend of my brother's, and he said, I called up to the school and talked to Mrs. Widger, who was the head of the business department, and I had taken all shorthand and transcription and typing. And we asked for did she know of a student who would be good at a job here, and she recommended me, and well, I'll come over. And so I got a job there, full-time, $2.10 an hour. I thought I was living. My first paycheck, I think the first week I worked was, you'd work 1 week 38 hours, and the next was 42 or something, and my paycheck was like $80.10, and I netted 60 something. Oh boy, it was such big money. And the first thing I did was open a checking account, and I joined the Doubleday Book Club because I'm an avid reader, and you could get 13 books for 99 cents or whatever. And my father sees these books come in. What is this? And I joined this book club. How are you going to pay for that? And I have a job. Well, what are you going to write a check? And I said, I have a checking account. You better pay that bill. And it seemed so mean at the time, but you learn by that. And boy, we always paid our bills. And he was just he could not believe I did that. And every time a bill would come in, don't forget to pay that. Write that check. Pay it right now. Okay, Dad. And then I can't even tell the story, but an abbreviated version, we worked on Tuesday nights. They were open late and slow and not much going on. And the parts guy saw me just kind of looking. I was the cashier there and did the deals and stuff, and kind of looking out into the shop. And he said, "Are you looking at Dryden?" I was like, "No." And he says, "No, I think you're staring at Dryden." And I said, "Well, maybe you like him." Well, then all the mechanics come up to the parts counter, and there's hooting and hollering, and I was dying of embarrassment. And long story short, and cleaner story, I guess, they said, "Dryden, Wendy'd go out with you." And he came up to the cashier's window. I was just so nervous. And he said, "Is that true? Would you go out with me?" And I said, "Yeah." And he, very brave of me. And he said, "Oh, okay." And he walked away. But he did come back, and he asked me out. That was in 76, 7?
7.
And then we started dating, got married in 79. And then you take over. What happened then? Now you're new in town.
Yeah, I'm new, brand new.
1979.
Yeah, so my life before 79 doesn't exist. Born and raised Phoenix, New York. First taste of Baldwinsville was we were visiting the ordnance works out on 60 Road. We had ridden our bicycles out, my friends and I, and there were still a lot of buildings, and we had heard rumors that there were hand grenades in the bunkers, and so we're 7 years old looking for hand grenades. Fortunately, we didn't find any, but we did explore all that. Next weekend, we decided to ride out to Baldwinsville after going through the ordnance works. So we came out to Baldwinsville and got lost, and found our way back to Phoenix. That was our great adventure. First time I remember seeing Baldwinsville. But I got a job at Evans, second or third job, I think. Van Wees, yeah, at the time. And that's probably 74, 5, somewhere there, working as a technician. Worked there 4 years. Met my wife, Wendy. Got married in 79. That's when I kind of moved in here. Rented an apartment from her parents, right next door to the funeral home. Same house. Stayed there till 92, 91.
Oh, we stayed, yeah.
Yeah, we lived there till 92. Then bought the house down on Edgewood. Been there 24 years, I think.
This year?
This year, 24 years. Yeah. Daughter was born in 87. She lived here right up until she graduated high school, and we haven't seen her since.
She's quite a traveler.
Yeah, she went to college in Albany. Went to Wake Forest for grad school. She's been to Africa, Korea, India, Spain, Australia. Yeah, she's been all over the world.
Wow.
I got to visit with her. I went to Africa with her. We went to Korea. My nephew and I, Eddie McElroy, went over to visit her. She was teaching English there for a year. So we spent a week and a half over there in Korea. It was a lot of fun. And she got a job in India videotaping some different jobs for her college. So I went over for a week over there, and that was 2012. Anyways, I left Evans, went over to Canales spent a couple years there, went up to Palmer's for 10 years, came back to what was Evans Chevrolet as service manager 28 years ago. 28 years ago. Yeah, been there ever since. Hopefully soon retire from there. So next month, I don't know.
Right after you find another job.
Oh yeah. Couple, three of them.
You're skipping, well, we got on the village board.
Oh yeah, that was 92, 93, I think. Rick Presley, local, longtime politician on the village board, asked me as a customer at Evans. He saw me at one of the meetings once, and he says, "Would you be interested in running for office?" And I never thought about it, but thought about it a little bit, gave it a shot. And there, Bruce Stebbins and I came on the board at the same time. Both our competitions bowed out because we were so great. So we had a non-contested election. So it was an easy one. Spent a year with Gene Wells as mayor, then Dan O'Hare got elected. That was by '94. I became the deputy mayor for 6 years, and then he left and I was mayor for 4 after that. And it's one of those things that people ask you, how'd you like it? And I'm glad I did it, glad I don't. It's a lot of fun, interesting, quite a good way to learn all about the village of Wallensville. And being a construction guy, electrical, the DPW was my best interest. And we, during the 6 years of O'Hare, we built the island, the amphitheater, did all that work. And I was right in the middle of, with the construction and all the plans, helped with the wiring, that kind of thing. That was a whole lot of fun.
You did the sound for the first
the
concert
opening,
on the island.
the opening ceremony for the amphitheater. The electricians, the union electricians that were under permit to wire the island were going to be done at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we needed power taps out on the stage for the band. Mark Gummer was the sound guy. He lives up on Canton Street near his offices. He does stage work for all bands all over the world, I guess. And he's a great big guy. He's a nice guy. He's probably 6'5", 300 pounds. And I remember being there and had to run the city electric, get a special type of circuit breaker for that brand new style panel that I've never seen before. On the way back from city electric, I get a flat tire and a van full of stuff, everything in the world in my van for doing electrical. So I get that fixed, get over here, the permit guy and the inspector's there issuing the permits, so now I can take over, look up the circuits and get some power up to the stage. Mark Gummer's got every speaker that's ever been owned in the world on that island. He's got amplifiers that would fill this room, It was incredible. But I remember right till the last minute getting that wire hooked up, and "You gonna get this done?" "Yes, yep, I'm gonna get it done." We just drilled a hole through the wall, ran the wires out, hooked up his equipment, and the island took off that night. And I think when he first turned the sound on, the island moved backwards a little bit. We had noise complaints all day the next day. "You will not do that again." We had him tone it down. They ended up shutting most of the speakers off, but it was an incredible night. A lot of fun.
Who was the band? Otis Day
remember
and the
the first
Night, Otis Night and the Day. They were in Animal House, that movie.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
And they were awesome. They were really good. But I do remember a lot of noise complaints from that one.
We struggled the first year trying to find the right balance of bands and noise. And after a few venues and a few complaints, we kind of figured out there's certain types of bands that maybe you don't want there. The shrieking, high frequency noise that just tends to drive people crazy. But we had complaints from Plainville, more so just up the river. You could almost, by logging where the complaints were, figure out they were in line of sight of this right in the river. The water does funny things with sound. It just rolls right over the top of it and just bam. We had a couple bands that were bad just being there. They were loud and crazy loud. But once we learned the proper bands and got the decibels right, and we changed the law a few times, try to keep the noise ordinance within reason for that contest. But all in all, the first few years were quite successful. We had venues almost every weekend in the summer, and fireworks. Being right on the point of the island, watching the fireworks is pretty cool. They're just about over top of you, which is neat.
Remember when I thought a big thing when you were mayor was the flood.
Oh, that's right.
June 14th,
Don't ask me.
2002. I remember 2002, June 12th or 14th. That was, I remember waking up in the morning, going out to work at 7:15. Kids are waiting for the bus and it just started to rain. And I opened the garage door, let them stay in the garage, stay dry. And it was early summer, so being June, and I checked the pool level to make sure it was right at the diamonds on the skimmer, because we get all the poplar from all the local trees that just tear up the pile in the pool and plug the screen. But if you kept it right at the perfect level, it'd all pile up in the back and not plug it up. So I tried real hard to keep it there. But I remember looking, yeah, this is good level. Went to work, and about 10 o'clock, Claude Sykes, the highway superintendent, called him. Said, we're getting inundated here, we're getting flooded, it's raining and won't stop. And I'm looking out, it's raining hard, but big deal. And Claude, you worry too much, don't worry about it. About 11 o'clock, and looked out the swamp, and it was coming up to the door at Evans, is right up at the edge, and okay, we got a problem. So I went home to get a coat and hat and looked at the pool, and the water was running over the concrete of the pool, with force, and I'm looking at it, it's probably 6-7 inches. That's a lot for a few hours, but we can handle quite a bit more. We get down and we start looking around. The creek is flooding in the bowling alley. I remember that. Firemen are there pumping, and they're putting sandbags in. The ambulance corps threatened to get flooded. Village Hardware is getting nervous, so we decided, more so for anything, just to limit traffic driving through the floodwaters, is declare a state of emergency. And we did that about 12:30, something like that. And shortly within an hour, it stopped raining, but the bowling alley had been severely flooded. I remember driving over the river at noon, and you could see the big creek over by what is now Dunkin' Donuts. It's a 6-foot culvert, the 9-mile, 3-mile creek, whatever it is, Tanner Creek, comes through that pipe. And that pipe was blown 6 feet, about 3/4 of the way out in the river before the top edge of that water had hit the river. That's the force that was flowing out of that creek. I've never seen anything like that. The bowling alley was just a mess. There's stuff floating around. They couldn't stop it. I remember the water would hit 31 Hill up towards Budweiser, come down the hill, come down with such force, it went in next to the fish fry, Atlantic Seafood, and gouged out that parking lot. You could park 3 buses in that hole that was in there. Mimi's engraving got nailed pretty bad. Once we declared a state of emergency, the police could go out and stop traffic from coming through the floodwaters, which the wakes would cause more problems. They get sandbags up, and somebody drive through and it'd wash over their sandbag. And a lot of kids thought that was great fun to do that until they got arrested. We had sewer problems, obviously. And, all the sewers would back up in the house. Several houses down that area that got flooded pretty bad. State of emergency allowed us to send the DPW in and do repairs without having to charge the owners. Normally you can't get the service, but under that power you can go in and fix the sewer lines that were floating up out of the ground. And we did a lot of work down there. I remember an Angle Mohawk being in there on Mechanic Street, and none of the houses had gas valves, so they couldn't shut the gas off. So now it's flooding. The pilot lights go out, the gas bubbles up, and you can blow a house up. So they're in there with backhoes. They got ropes tied to them. They got all the rigs on. They're digging holes. They're getting down the gas lines. They're lifting. They're just covered in mud. They're putting these valves in and shutting them off, and then pulling themselves back up by the ropes. Just incredibly difficult task for them. But they put a gas valve in every single house that was affected. Within a few hours, that was pretty good work on their part. By the next day, it kind of flowed away, and I went home, and I think it was we walked around a little bit with the newspaper, all those people. And I came back and lowered the pool level, and then I measured from the diamond to the top of the concrete is almost 10 inches. Now, that was about from 7:30 to 10:30. It was 10 inches, because it was flowing out. And it'd been, flowing for a while, I'm sure. And it continued to rain for a few more hours. So the best guess is at least a foot of rain in 4 hours. It's one of these 500-year storms. Just happened to be a train of storms, one after the other, just hitting from Plainville out to, I think, North Syracuse. It went as far as that. With just a very narrow band, but it just dumped and dumped and dumped. And it was a 500-year flood that fortunately hasn't happened since. But there's a lot of problems with Tanner Creek, with the railroad company, and the culverts they put in to save the tracks, it washed out a section of track up by Smoky Hollow Road. And they come in and just put another culvert and they put gravel in. They don't have any care about what that does downstream. So we tried to work with them, and they're being a quasi-government federal agency sort of, railroad companies are very difficult and they don't care. And we worked with the town of Lysander to try to identify some staging areas for future flooding, try to divert some water, hold some water, pond it up for a little while. That would slow down the flooding at Tannery Creek in the future. We did get town of Lysander to do some work out there, and hopefully it'll prevent the worst of the worst. I remember right after I declared state of emergency, Jim Walsh called and said, anything you can do, federal government can do for you. And I'm thinking, 16 ride would be a lot of fun, but there wasn't much we couldn't handle. It was, we didn't know what the expenses would be. At some point in the future, maybe you can. For right now, we got talking to the bowling alley, and they had just done a $300,000 renovation. They had just gotten a loan, large loan, redid the floors, the pin, the machines, all that stuff, and of course ruined it all. And lo and behold, they didn't have any flood insurance, so now they're out of luck. And I'm talking to them a little bit, and I said, "What bank did you get the loan through?" And they said a bank, and it's a federal bank. So I called Jim Walsh and I said, "Well, the bowling alley has got a problem. They got a loan from a federally sanctioned bank. They don't have any flood insurance." He goes, "Well, that can't be." And I said, "No." And next day they had flood insurance, so they got their check, and that was thanks to Jim Walsh, who twisted somebody's arm to make sure things got done right. And so they got the rebuild and fixed the bowling alley and turned it back into a nice place to be. And they would have been.
Yeah. That's why they had that big party afterwards, and you were the guest of honor. I thought it was because you helped sandbag. Well, you did.
Yeah.
Was that still Sidex then?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it must have been.
I remember going to talk to one of the customers there. There was an issue at the time with the fire department, and we all know about that. But one of the customers there, well, the village of Ballinsville allowed that culvert to be plugged up. Back when they built Dunkin' Donuts, they know about it, and they didn't. It's not plugged. It most certainly is. They put plywood, they put this down there, and I said, "Look, go look at the pipe. It's blowing as far out as 6 feet of water in a column going across the river just well. It's not plugged." And they didn't believe it. But too bad.
That whole area down there, remember Palmer Lane and the lower end of Elizabeth?
Yeah.
They had boats out there
Yeah.
going through there. How long before it went down?
By that evening, it had receded away from the properties. Where the cellars were still flooded, still pumping cellars the next morning down in that lower section.
You had that, and then you know the weather stuff, Labor Day storm.
Yeah.
Ice storm.
Ice storm, and
Oh, the ice storm! I forgot
the ice
that.
storm, that was wild.
we were camping actually at Van Wees Camp Labor Day weekend.
Up in Old Forge.
In Old Forge, as deputy mayor. Dan O'Hara was mayor. He had a camp not far from there, actually. And, remember, he called me 9 o'clock in the morning and said, "We're in trouble. We got their state of emergency on county. Big storm went through." And we had heard it. Evans's camp is on Fourth Lake, and at the time it was over a boathouse, and there's all these glass walls out over the lake, and it's just a beautiful place. We were sleeping in the corner, had glass on 2 sides, and it's an older camp, and this storm came through, and it was incredible. And the lightning, that just, you've been up north in the storms, they come on quick, they leave quick usually, but this thing lasted a couple hours, and you could hear the thunder, the boom, and then you'd hear it again when it reflected off the mountain over on the other side of the lake, and it worked back and forth. It was knocking dust on us, and I'm thinking, being over top of water, glass place maybe isn't the best place to be.
It was scary.
Dan called it, like I said, 9 or so in the morning. Finally, he got the number somehow, and we're in trouble. We got to get back to Beeville. And well, who the hell's in charge? And he goes, "Well, Claude." "Oh, we're in trouble." So we got back. It took quite a while, actually. The side roads were closed. The thruway had just opened up, I think, when we got in. And as you're coming in towards Baldwin, you could see all the road signs in the thruway were all blowing over in one direction. So straight line winds that are incredible. And then we heard, once we got some radio stations, we heard that a person died at the State Fair. And we didn't suffer too much. We had several trees that were knocked down, of course, and that happens every big storm.
Just
You know,
our neighborhood.
yeah. A lot
I
of old
didn't
trees.
see you the rest of the day. He went out with his chainsaw up at the end of the street, which was, I think, blocked by a tree. And
You got Edgewood open, I went up, Bruce Evans went up there in Brown Street, and there's a big tree on the phone wires there. A great big old, maple is, 30 foot in diameter. I know it's huge, but I got a 18-inch chainsaw trying to open up the street. Not doing a very good job of it, but we did get it moved a little bit. But we got the power back on. We're fortunate that Budweiser's close by because they're on the same power substation as what most of the village is. So Budweiser is the biggest customer of Naguac at the time, so they turn it on very quickly. They work really hard to get it back on. So that was the ice storm was the bad one that broke everything.
was that 03? It had to been, because we had no power for a couple days.
Syracuse.
And SU was in the national championship, and the game was coming on, and the clock's ticking. We have no power, and what are we gonna do? A lot of the village had it. Our neighborhood didn't at that point, and that was my biggest worry. Other than we were freezing, and we were a good, I think, 2 days without power.
2-3 days.
Like the one time in all the years he was on the village board, I ever heard him say, throw, mayor out there. And he went over to a NIMO crew that had just come in the neighborhood, and he's like, I'm the mayor, and when are we gonna get power? And they're like, oh, Mr. Mayor. And then they actually yelled over at some point, said, coming on. And it was like 5 minutes to game time. I was just dying.
Literally in the driveway, getting in the car to go somewhere to watch the game.
Right.
And when the NIMO came through, you're all set. And great. Went back in the house and watched the game.
Like,
It
shoot.
got warm. But,
I think it's one time he ever in public ever mentioned to anybody that he was on the board or mayor or anything. Saved it for a good one.
That's right.
Because they won.
Remember when it first hit, I was outside, we were talking to one of the reporters who had called, I hear you getting the storm, we have a black locust in the village tree in the front yard. And I'm standing underneath the tree, everything's slippery, and you hear the trees breaking, and all of a sudden this branch comes down on top of me while I'm on the phone with the guy. Of course, they had a few choice words for that, and don't print that. We actually had to go to Plainville, take my daughter's boyfriend home, lived out there. And there's trees down, we got out there pretty well, but on the way back, and as the trees fall, the ice builds up, they build up, break the limbs, and the trees tend to fall over. I think it took us 3 hours to find a route home. Never thought to bring a chainsaw, which would have helped.
Well, who would think to?
Well, I would.
You and
But we got home, and then we lost a lot of trees that year. That was, which reminds me of the early snowstorm we had. Not legal, but well, I'm sure it had, but it was. It's probably 45 years ago, probably. 17, 18 years old.
Are you?
Yeah. And we had a car we were fixing out in west of Albany, kind of Route 6 area out past Phoenix. The guy called and said, this tree's going to break and your car's under it, so grabbed the chainsaw, went out there. And it was early October, I remember that. It's like the 16th of October. And it was just this wet, heavy snow. We went out there and moved the cars and cut some trees that had fallen and spent a long time cutting. And then you're trying to sleep, and at night you hear all night long. It's all you heard was just trees breaking,
that's why we heard that ice storm. Yeah.
6 o'clock in the morning, one came through the picture window, and that was fun. Always a lot of storms.
Not weather related, but I remember when we were just dating. And my dad, we heard the fire horn go off, 21, which is 4 corners. Everybody perked up. And he went out front and he said, boy, something's going on downtown. So we all schlepped out of the house and went down. It was Corner Pharmacy. It was burning. Which must have been in November or October, because it was the night before opening day of deer season. I remember that. And you had to get up, and you had to go back home and then get up in the morning and go hunting. But what a fire that was.
It was their first ladder truck for the village. Don Austin was running the ladder truck. He was up on the bucket spraying the water. I didn't know this at the time, but I was talking to Don Austin some years later. And we were talking about the fire. He goes, yeah, that's the first time we had the ladder truck. We had the wrong nozzle, they had this, they were trying everything they could to get water on it, but it was, of course, unable to save it at that point. Being a wooden structure like that is just gone, you know.
And there was so much stuff in it. I remember explosions like out of the basement. I think that's where they kept their drugs and stuff, or the pharmacy, and quite a thing to watch between that and the Sirocco fire.
Yeah.
That was, I mean, corner pharmacy was so much more personal because you knew the
But
man's
the
ways.
Sirocco had the odor to it, though. That was a concern too.
Yeah, because all the plastics and chemicals they had in there. The corner pharmacy was just like, I was trying to think, was it one of the cashiers, Zora?
Yes,
Maloney?
Maloney.
And the Mazways. It was like you knew people, and Jim Woods, and you knew the people that owned it and worked there, and it was almost like, huh?
That counts.
Oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
forgot that, yeah. I remember the bus stop was there, and Archie Ayler sat out on that bench by the hour with all his books and stuff. He was kind of a fixture around the village, and I was thinking of him last night. That I mean, he just always was around. He used to come up and sit and talk with our mother. She was kind to him, and people kind of picked on him, and he would come up and visit with her. And he always had his radio with him. He carried a little transistor radio. And he's a nice guy, harmless. And I don't know why that makes me think of it, but I can remember talking about letting kids go. We just ran the streets, it seemed like, and I'd go downtown for something at 10 or 11 years old, or maybe even a little younger. And I think my mother ever said it was never, be careful, or it was, don't go near the pool hall. There was Beeville Billiards up where Mohegan Manor is, and it was like, ooh, that's where the bad boys hung out, was the pool hall. Don't go near that pool hall. You could go to Troy Market and Corner Pharmacy. I'd go to Corner Pharmacy on this every Sunday morning. My brother, who's the mayor now, Dick Clark, he would give me, I think it was a quarter, and I'd ride my bike down. I could get him the Sporting News for 20 cents, and I'd have a nickel for candy. And it was a good deal for me. Worked all around. And my mom, I can still remember, probably 53 years later, her letting me walk down to the Troy Market, Bill Murray's Troy Market. She let me go down and get something, loaf of bread or something. And of course she could watch from the front of our house all the way down the street, watch me go down there. And I thought I was something else to be able to go down there by myself.
Wendy, wasn't your mother a nurse at Morris for a while too?
Before she started working full-time at Allied, she used to do, years ago she did private duty nursing. And she would fill in for Morris's, Pass and Seymour, Allied Chemical, probably somewhere else, when their nurses went on vacation. So she always worked at Morris's probably 4 weeks out of the year. And the week she was working there, I was probably in 4th and 5th grade. We could go down there, and you go up the side back to they make ball bearings and centrifugal pumps, but ball bearings are a big part of it. And we go up and ask one of the guys out in the warehouse, can we have some Steelies? And they used to say, get out of here, you kids. But I said, my mom's working in there. And, well, who's that? Mrs. Clark. Oh, Mrs. And they'd come out with handfuls of ball bearings. And these were gold for marble players, such as I was. And it was just like money in the bank to me. Popular kid. Now I had all the Steelies. And yeah, she worked there she worked at the post office every Christmas.
Their uncle.
For a couple weeks when it was busy at Christmas time. I can remember, speaking of the post office, I had gotten my class ring and I lost it. And I was home one day. I think I was might have been working at Van Wees by then, but somebody knocked on the door. I was home by myself. Went out and this woman was there with a young boy, and she said, we're looking for a Wendy Clark. And that's me. And she said, well, we were just at going to the post office, and the snow banks were like this, and they cut through as people walked in and out of the post office. And they were walking through, and her son happened to look down. He found this class ring. And they went in the post office and said, are there any Clarks around? Clark with an E. And somebody in the post office said, right up the street, 27 West Genesee. I was like, I got my class ring back that way. Just
fun.
small town.
That's great. Yeah.
And I can
Yeah.
remember one time our dad got a letter, and I can't tell you who it was from, and it was addressed Barney Clark, Beeville, New York. And he got the letter because they knew him at the post office. And I was trying to think who the postmaster was then.
Uncle Dave was for a while, was he, Dave Eater?
Yeah, and then after him, and he was a Beeville guy. There was a Chamberlain, but it was before that, I think. Can't remember who it was. But yeah, our mom went on to work at LA Chemicals, the plant nurse. She worked there for many years. Our dad died in 1990. And 14 months later, our mom died. And then right after that, well, a few months after that, we moved up to Edgewood, where we still are. Cindy's back at the family homestead. So it's still a Clark house.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose it will be for the rest of our lifetime, I assume. And what else?
Oh, your grandfather from Bulgaria.
Well, Grandpa started it all, I guess, coming over from Bulgaria in 1912. He actually, little trivia, he saw the Titanic sink from the ship he was on, which I never knew until I did some kind of report in a history class, and I had to talk to an immigrant. I said, oh, I know one. And that's the only time I ever heard him talk about it. But he worked for the railroads and going on the railroads, ended up in Beeville, and he had opened a little like sandwich shop first, where right next to where the bakery was. Not quite sure what's there now, on the corner there. And then he had
Dr. Bruce.
BJ's was a bar and grill down
It was near the bridge.
between the two bridges.
I think it was, right in that area.
And there was upstairs to those
Yeah.
buildings then, I think,
Yeah.
which is gone now. They had an apartment up above, not Sheehan's, but the next spot there. I can remember looking out there. They had an apartment they stayed in during the week, and then they'd go down to Seneca Beach on the weekends. They had a house there. And you could look out their window, and you were looking at the river, which is now Baldwin Park, or used to be where the fire barn was. And back then it was still
The old
water.
canal,
Huh?
The old canal.
Canal. And he owned Niver's Grill. I don't think he ever ran that, did he?
I don't think so.
But he owned it.
He had his own
Al's
little ran,
Niver's
yeah,
ran.
blind house. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was quite old when I got to know him, but one of the nicest guys in the world.
Mhm.
He'd be there at night and he'd sit there and this is the secret. He'd have one shot of whiskey every night. I don't know how old he was when he died, 90.
About 90,
Yeah, he's
90,
up there.
somewhere in there.
So I think that's probably some good advice I'm gonna have to start trying.
Chewing tobacco and one
Yeah,
little
one
shot
little shot.
every night he had. For,
The
Nostrovia.
Yeah, that was blackberry brandy, I thought, yeah.
oh, well, that too then.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a mixture. I
think
don't
so.
know. I think the alcohol is the important
Uh-huh.
part. And then, I don't know, fast forward, we're still here. I worked for the Messenger for many years, for Dick Manville, Brown Newspapers. Worked there 20 years, then worked for Eagle Newspapers. Now I'm at Bruin Computer in Liverpool. And I'm blank. Oh, I'm on the board of PAC-B. And so is Andy now. My friend Beverly Selby, who was my boss at the newspaper, coerced me to be on that board. And then we did the same to Andy. And then I'm also on the board of directors of Volunteer Center. Both great organizations here, which is another thing I like about Baldwinville. I think it's a very generous community, and I like that. I'm looking at the books, this book sale, this museum here. If anybody doesn't know about this Shakespeare Museum, it's great. I was looking at the old bottles here. They have one of the best gift shops. I think it rivals Village Hardware. I love that little gift shop, which Andy finds a waste of valuable hardware space,
Yeah.
but I like the gift shop. And this one's awesome. It's great. You should definitely make the trip out here to see it.
Well, you go in a hardware store, it has a certain odor and a certain attraction for guys. You go in there, you smell all this frou-frou,
It's true.
scented candles.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what's
Feel
your
like
point?
it's not a hardware store.
Oh, sorry. Skanks Hardware, Western Auto.
Mm-hmm.
Those are hardware stores. Huh?
Barkers and Woolworths, yeah.
Was that Ma Barkers or
Just Barkers, remember?
Barkers?
Tickums.
Tickums, S&S,
Yeah.
Windships, Joe
Yeah.
Glass,
Yeah.
Tags and Bootery afterwards, DJs. Remember Thelma Eckert had a dress shop way almost before my time.
Were you taking her to the grocery store and buying meat? Remember that story?
Oh, Thelma, that was sad at that point. She ran the Seneca Grill. I don't know if she owned it, but she ran it for a long time. And then she had run a boarding house. And she had a dress shop right on the corner across from what was the old post office, Dr. Sorwhitey's. She had a dress shop there for a while. And then she moved up by us, and I used to take her for groceries. She'd fill a cart with meat. And we'd get up to and I'd take it out as fast as because she was thinking she was still running her boarding house. And luckily the gals, at whatever it was then, it was even before P&C, Loblaws or something was over across the river. They were so nice about it. She was a character, old Thelma.
Well, she got some meat out because she had this dog. And
Oh
this-
my God.
That we
Baron.
had to
Yeah.
take to the vet one
Baxter,
time. And you know, I was a young, strong man, and I couldn't lift that dog up. That dog was so big.
He was
on
a
200
boxer, and he was about this big,
Yeah.
or she was so overweight.
If he wasn't 150 pounds, he wasn't anything. He was huge.
Yeah.
Just, but
We had nice neighbors all the way through.
Mrs. Collins,
Yeah.
Mrs. Collins, Doc Hawley, Mr. Hawley across the street. Coleman's lived there, Joe Coleman, Kathy. Always had nice neighborhood. Back when you had a neighborhood there, it's not so much anymore.
She just passed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's different now, I guess, but we'll still be here.
yeah, for a while.
I think that's all we got.
Are you comfortable with that? Being the end of it, or anybody got any questions? Cindy,
Got anything?
do you have any questions?
No, I don't. I think they covered
Thank you
most
very
of it.
much.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
having us.
It was very good, very interesting. See, you had a lot to say.
Yes, very
Thank you for listening us. I mean, asking us.
First
We'll
thing,
give a copy of this, of course. And
Well, we
anybody
know
else
people
that
down
wants a
there.
copy is $15. And it supports PAC-B. So that's important too.
Which is a good thing to support.
And we've got Hot Chocolate coming up next month, correct, Mary?
November 10th,
And we're going to do the dedication of the sidewalk.
October 23rd, Sunday, I believe.
Eagle Scout did that as his project, putting the new sidewalk
The
in
brick out
papers.
here,
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Noticed that when we came
Yeah.
in.
I should hire him for my bricks.
Yeah, really.